Our source today, it's excerpts from The Shocking Truth of the Good Samaritan. And look, this isn't just your Sunday school recap. The source calls it a wake-up call challenge. It says the implications might just leave you speechless when you really get the original punch of it. It suggests this ancient story is way more than, be nice to people. It's framed as a total rethink of what being a neighbor actually means. So our mission for this deep dive, let's unpack this thing. We'll revisit the story we think we know. Then we'll try and step back into its original time, understand the cultural fireworks it set off, and really uncover that hidden, radical meaning. From there, we'll pull it right into 2024. What's it demanding from us? And finally, we'll look at some honestly inspiring ways people are actually living this out today. So if you're ready to look past the familiar surface and find something deeper, maybe tougher. Okay. Let's get into this deep dive. Okay, let's start by painting the picture again. The parable of the Good Samaritan. Luke chapter 10. Jesus tells this story. There's a man, a traveler, heading down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Now, you need to know, this wasn't like a pleasant country walk. This road was infamous.
Oh, absolutely. About 17 miles, steep descent, rocky, desolate terrain. They actually called it the Way of Blood.
The Way of Blood. Wow.
Yeah, because bandit attacks were incredibly common. It was notoriously dangerous.
So this traveler, he's alone, he's exposed, vulnerable, basically a prime target.
Exactly, and dependent on goodwill if anything went wrong.
And, well, something goes very wrong. Disaster strikes. He gets jumped by thieves. They don't just rob him, they strip him naked, beat him savagely, and just leave him for dead.
Utterly brutal. The text implies he's barely alive.
Imagine that scene. He's bleeding, broken, probably unconscious or close to it, lying ditched on the side of this dangerous road, life just hanging by a thread.
Completely helpless, at the mercy of whoever comes along next. It's a picture of absolute desperation.
And this image of utter need is exactly where the story starts to challenge expectations.
Right, because the first people to come along aren't just random folks. First, a priest sees him.
Okay, a priest, a religious leader, someone you'd absolutely expect to help, right?
Precisely. A figure dedicated to God, temple service, upholding the law, representing piety, the moral authority in that society.
So he sees the man.
He sees him, and then he crosses to the other side of the road and passes by.
Just walks past. Wow.
Then another person comes along, a Levite.
Also a religious figure.
Yes, also involved in temple service, assisting the priests, seen as knowledgeable in the law, another pillar of the religious community.
And he
does the exact same thing, sees the man, gets to the spot, and passes by on the other side.
So the two people you'd most expect to embody compassion and religious duty, both actively avoid him.
Actively avoid him. Now, there might have been reasons, maybe concerns about ritual purity, touching a dead body, or even someone severely bleeding could make them ritually unclean, preventing temple duties.
Ah, okay. So maybe a conflict between religious rules and human need.
Possibly. But the text doesn't offer excuses. It just states their actions. Starkly, they saw, they avoided. The contrast between their status and their inaction is immediate and, frankly, shocking.
Okay, so the scene is set. Desperate man ignored by the religious elite. And then, this is where it gets really interesting, isn't it?
This is where the story explodes. The third person to arrive is a Samaritan.
Samaritan. Now, we hear that and think Good Samaritan, like it's a positive term. But for Jesus's audience?
Oh, it was the opposite. It would have been a massive shock, maybe even offensive to some listeners.
Why? What was the deal between Jews and Samaritans?
Deep hostility. Centuries of bad blood. It wasn't just disagreement, it was genuine hatred. Rooted in history, ethnicity, religion, everything.
So, like, what specifically?
Jews saw Samaritans as ethnically impure, descended from Israelites who intermarried with foreigners centuries before. Religiously, they saw them as heretics. Samaritans had their own temple site on Mount Gerizim, not Jerusalem. They had their own version of the Torah. Jews generally avoided Samaria, wouldn't share food, wouldn't associate.
They were the enemy, the outsider. Yep.
Absolutely. The despised other. So for Jesus to even put a Samaritan in this story, let alone as the potential hero, that was incredibly provocative. He was deliberately pushing buttons.
And what does this Samaritan do? Does he also walk by?
No. And this is the core of it. He sees the man, and unlike the others, he feels compassion, deep pity, the gut-wrenching kind. And crucially, he acts on it.
He stops.
He stops, which remember is risky on this dangerous road. And this injured man is a Jew, someone who would likely despise him. But he overcomes all that.
What does he actually do?
He goes right up to him. He doesn't just check if he's alive, he tends to his wounds. He pours on oil and wine.
Which was like actual first aid then?
Exactly. Oil to soothe, Wine is a kind of antiseptic. He bandages the wounds. This is direct, hands-on personal care. He's touching someone potentially ritually unclean, definitely bloody and broken.
Yeah.
He's ignoring all those barriers.
Okay, so immediate medical help, then what?
Then he lifts the man, which wouldn't have been easy, onto his own animal, his own donkey or mule.
So he's walking now?
Presumably, yes. He gives up his own means of transport. He takes the man to the nearest inn, a place of safety and shelter.
And just leaves him there?
No. He stays with him, looks after him overnight. Then, the next day, she has to leave. But he pays the innkeeper. He gives him 2 denarius.
2 denarius? Is that a lot?
It was significant. A denarius was roughly a day's wage for a common laborer. So this is like 2 days' pay up front. Enough to cover lodging and care for potentially a couple of weeks. It's a real financial sacrifice.
Wow, okay.
But wait, there's more. He doesn't just pay and leave. He tells the innkeeper, look after him, and if you spend any more than this, I'll reimburse you when I return.
He promises to come back.
Yeah.
And cover any extra cost.
Yes. It's an open-ended commitment. This isn't just a one-off act of charity. It's taking on long-term responsibility for a complete stranger, an enemy by societal standards.
That's staggering.
It really is.
Yeah.
You look at the totality of his actions. Stopping, despite the risk, overcoming prejudice, providing immediate and personal care, sacrificing his own comfort and transport, spending significant money, and then committing to future costs and follow-up.
It's not just kindness, it's something else entirely.
It's radical compassion, it's costly love. It completely transcends all the social, ethnic, and religious boundaries that should have kept him away. He saw a human being in need, and he responded with everything he had. It directly challenges the inaction of the priest and Levite and redefines help entirely.
Okay, so we have the story, but now let's really dig into what our source calls the shocking truth, because the power wasn't just what happened, but who did it and what that meant back then. We touched on the Jew-Samaritan hostility, but we really need to hammer this home right.
Absolutely. You cannot overstate it. This wasn't mild dislike. It was deeply ingrained cultural and religious loathing. Think generations of conflict, separation, mutual contempt. Samaritans were seen as betrayers of the true faith, ethnically tainted. Jews wouldn't even travel through their territory if they could help it.
Total separation, total distrust.
Complete societal boycott, essentially. So when Jesus crafts this story, and the Samaritan is the one who acts righteously, it's not just a plot twist.
Our source calls it a cultural explosion. That sounds about right.
It's like dropping a bomb in the middle of their assumptions.
Yeah.
It directly attacked their deepest prejudices about who was in and who was out, who was clean and unclean, who was righteous and who was, well, a despised Samaritan.
It forced them to see virtue where they were conditioned to see only heresy and enmity.
Exactly. And look how Jesus does it. He deliberately flips expectations, as the source says.
How so?
He takes the guys everyone assumed were righteous, the priest, the Levite, the religious insiders, the experts in the law, and shows them failing the basic test of compassion. They knew the rules, they had the status, but they missed the point entirely when faced with real human suffering.
Their piety didn't translate into action.
Not when it potentially cost them something like ritual purity or just convenience, but then Jesus takes the ultimate outsider, the Samaritan, the one they wouldn't even share water with, and makes him the embodiment of true godliness.
So it wasn't about having the right theology or being part of the right group.
Not according to this story. The Samaritan lived out the heart of God, not through correct belief or belonging, but through selfless, costly action towards someone in desperate need. Jesus is basically smashing their categories. He's saying, you want to see real righteousness? Look at this guy, the one you hate.
That must have been incredibly challenging for them to hear.
Profoundly unsettling. It redefined righteousness based on behavior, specifically compassionate action, rather than identity or religious affiliation. Love in action trumps everything else.
And then comes the final punchline, right? After telling the story, Jesus turns back to the lawyer who asked the initial question, who is my neighbor?
Right. The expert in religious law. Jesus asks him, so which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers?
And the lawyer, he can't deny the obvious, can he? Even if it's painful.
He has to admit it. He says, the one who showed him mercy. He can't even bring himself to say, the Samaritan, perhaps.
And Jesus' response?
Simple, direct, unavoidable. Go and do likewise.
Not go and believe likewise. Not go and admire likewise.
No, do. It's an imperative, a command. It shifts the entire thing from a theoretical discussion about defining neighbor into a practical mandate for action.
It's not about thinking the right thoughts. It's about doing the right things.
Precisely. It's not enough to feel sympathy or agree intellectually. Jesus demands participation. He's saying, you saw what neighborliness looks like in action. That's your model, now go live it.
So connecting this to the bigger picture, this parable isn't just a nice story, it's a fundamental shakeup.
It's a revolutionary redefinition of neighbor. Your neighbor isn't just the person like you or near you or who you like. Your neighbor is anyone you encounter who is in need. Full stop. Especially those you might be inclined to ignore or despise.
And it's a call to a specific kind of love.
Yes, an active, costly love. A love that isn't afraid to get its hands dirty, that crosses boundaries, that prioritizes the other person's need over your own comfort, convenience, finances, or even social standing. It demands we embody compassion, not just talk about it. It's about moving from being a spectator of suffering to being an agent of healing.
Okay, so that's the ancient context, the original shock. But let's pull this into our lives right now, because this isn't just history. Here's where, as the source says, it hits home. That road to Jericho. It runs right through your neighborhood, right through your office, right through your social media feed, maybe even right through your own silence when you see something difficult.
That's the challenge, isn't it? To see that the dynamic plays out constantly. The person experiencing homelessness you pass on the street, maybe avert your eyes. The coworker who seems withdrawn, maybe struggling silently but asking, feels awkward.
Yeah, or the family in your community clearly struggling financially, the kid getting picked on online or in the schoolyard, even just the sheer volume of need and pain that scrolls past us online every single day.
It's so easy to become numb or feel overwhelmed or just think someone else will handle it or it's not my problem. We have modern versions of passing by on the other side.
So the challenge then becomes, who are our passed by individuals? Who are you passing by maybe without even consciously realizing it?
It's a tough question to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
Is it, like the source suggests, that coworker you avoid, maybe because of some past awkwardness or just because they're different? Or the outcast, the person in your social circle, your church, your community who doesn't quite fit. The one it's easier to leave on the margins.
Or maybe the hardest one, the person who hurt you. Can compassion extend even there? The parable seems to suggest the Samaritan crossed an even bigger divide of hurt and history.
It does. And it makes you wonder, what are our modern equivalents of ritual purity that keep us from acting? Is it fear of getting involved? Fear of the cost? Is it our curated social media bubbles that shield us from uncomfortable realities?
Or just the sheer busyness and distraction of modern life? We're so focused on our own path, our own goals.
Right. We might not even see the person lying wounded on the side of our digital or physical road. We're passing by mentally, emotionally, even if we're physically close. It's a different kind of avoidance, perhaps, but the effect is the same.
And we have to talk about the cost. Let's be real. The source nails it. Compassion isn't convenient, it costs.
Always. There's no getting around that. It's not meant to be easy.
Look at the Samaritan again. What did it cost him? Time, definitely. He derailed his whole journey.
Significant time.
Yeah.
And comfort, getting down in the dirt, dealing with wounds, maybe giving up his ride. Physical discomfort for sure.
And the source mentions maybe even your pride. What's that about?
Well, think about the humility involved. Helping someone from a group you're supposed to hate. Setting aside your own status, your own agenda, to serve someone considered lesser or other. That requires shedding some pride, some ego.
Plus the actual money. The 2 denarii, the promise of more. It was a tangible financial hit.
A serious outlay. So the point is, this kind of love, the Good Samaritan kind, it demands something of us. It's not just a feeling, it's sacrificial action.
So what does this all mean for us? What's the takeaway here?
It means Jesus is laying out a definition of love that's property.
Well,
It's demanding. It's not cheap grace. It's not easy sentimentality.
it requires actual effort, actual sacrifice.
Exactly. It demands concrete action, often for the very people we find it hardest to love or help, the stranger, the difficult person, the one who makes us uncomfortable, the one who represents the other in our own lives. It pushes us way beyond our comfort zones.
So it's less about who deserves my help and more about who needs my help.
Precisely. It flips the question from judging the recipient to examining our own willingness to act with costly, boundary-breaking compassion. That's the radical challenge still resonating today.
Now, hearing all this, the cost, the challenge, it could feel a bit overwhelming. Like, who can actually live up to this?
It's a fair point. It's a high bar.
But the good news is, this isn't just a theoretical ideal from 2,000 years ago. Our source reminds us today, Good Samaritans still walk among us. People are actually doing this.
Yes, absolutely. It's happening all around us. maybe often quietly, without fanfare.
The source gives some examples, like a teenager who stopped to save a stranger. You can picture that, right?
Totally. Maybe someone collapses on the street. Lots of people might just walk past, maybe glance, maybe pull out their phone to record, sadly.
Well, yeah, or just assume someone else is handling it.
But this teenager stops. Maybe they know first aid, maybe they just offer comfort, call for help, stay with the person. They overcome that bystander effect. That's the Samaritan instinct. Interrupt your own life. Step into the gap for a stranger.
Okay, another example. A nurse who risked her life for the homeless.
Think about that. Especially during, say, a pandemic. We're dealing with populations that have complex health issues and maybe live in unsafe conditions.
Right. It's not just doing your job in a clean hospital. It's going out to where the need is, often where it's marginalized, ignored, maybe even dangerous.
It's prioritizing human dignity and care above personal safety or comfort. That directly mirrors the Samaritan leaving the road and tending to the wounded man right where he was, regardless of the mess or risk. It's sustained, costly care for the society often pushes aside.
And then this one. A man who forgave his enemy and turned hatred into healing. That feels like it takes it to another level entirely.
It really does, because the Jew-Samaritan animosity was the backdrop of the original story. Forgiveness across deep divides of hurt or ideology or history, that's incredibly difficult.
Much harder than giving money or time, maybe.
Often, yes. It requires immense emotional and spiritual strength. But when someone chooses reconciliation over revenge, dialogue over demonization, they're crossing perhaps the biggest boundary of all, the boundary of hatred. Just like the Samaritan crossed that societal boundary to show mercy to a Jew.
So these aren't just isolated nice deeds, there's a deeper pattern.
Exactly. As the source says, these people aren't just being good citizens, they're living the gospel. They are the ones actually answering Jesus' command. Go and do likewise.
Each example reflects a part of the parable.
Yes, the teenager shows the immediate, courageous intervention. The nurse shows the sustained sacrificial care for the marginalized. The man who forgave shows the radical boundary crossing that turns enmity into healing.
And none of it sounds passive. It's all active choice.
Conscious choice. It takes courage. It takes stepping into discomfort, not away from it. That's the living spirit of the Good Samaritan playing out right now. It's not just an ancient story, it's a present possibility.
Okay, so as we start to land this deep dive, it really comes down to a personal point, doesn't it? For you, listening right now, this story isn't just for analysis, it's an interrogation. It holds up a mirror. And the core question, the one that echoes right down through the centuries, is pretty simple but profound. Here's the question. On the road of life, are you passing by or are you stopping?
That's the essential choice we face constantly.
In big ways and small ways, when you see need, when you see injustice, when you see loneliness or pain, do you rationalize it away? Do you assume someone else will step up? Or do you stop? Do you, as the source puts it, cross the street or cross your comfort zone?
That's a great way to phrase it, because often compassion requires us to cross that internal boundary of comfort, convenience, or even fear.
It's about choosing engagement over indifference, action over apathy.
And it's crucial to remember why the Samaritan's actions were so significant. The source highlights this. The Good Samaritan didn't just help, he acted like Jesus.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, in the context of Christian theology from which the story comes, Jesus himself is portrayed as the ultimate example of costly, self-sacrificial love that crosses every boundary between God and humanity, between different groups of people. So, acting like the Samaritan is seen as mirroring that divine compassion.
So it's more than just being a nice person, it's participating in something bigger.
It's participating in a way of being that reflects that kind of radical love. It's not just about performing isolated acts of charity, as good as those are. It's about cultivating a heart, an awareness, that sees the wounded on the roadside of life and responds instinctively, courageously, generously.
Becoming a force for good in places we might normally just ignore.
Exactly. Transforming our default setting from pass by to stop and see. Seeing the need not as an interruption or a burden, but as an invitation to act with love. Even when, maybe especially when, it costs us something. #outro.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe the key thing to hold on to is that distinction our source made right at the start. It really sticks with you. Kindness is easy, love is costly.
That sums it up powerfully. Simple kindness often doesn't demand much from us. But the kind of love the Good Samaritan demonstrated, the kind this parable calls us to, has a price tag. Time, energy, money, comfort. maybe even reputation or pride.
And if we take that seriously, if we want to embody that spirit, then, as the source concludes, we don't get to walk around the wounded. We're called to walk with them.
Yeah, not just throw money from a distance or offer quick advice, but to actually journey alongside people in their need, offering presence, support, and tangible help. It's a challenging goal, no doubt about it.
But also potentially transformative for them and for us.
Absolutely.
So for you listening, maybe here's the final thought to take away, and more than that, to maybe act on. Think about your road this week, your commute, your interactions, your online spaces. Look for just one opportunity to go and be someone's Good Samaritan.
Even a small step across that comfort zone.
Yes. Exactly, because the road to Jericho, it starts right now, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and yeah, keep engaging with the world and the people around you.